Notification for the live stream.
Oh, yeah.
All right, we are live. Welcome everybody to the Gunner Technology Livestream, a weekly tech talk for non-techies and techies alike. I'm your host, Derry Merkins. With me is CEO of Gunner Technology, Cody Swan. What's up, Cody?
Not much, just rocking the old Zuckerberg hoodie today because it's like a balmy, like 90 degrees here in Florida.
It's random that we both went casual on this episode. Neither of us are rocking the Gunner Technology polos, but we are rocking the Country Shore swag. I got my shirt. Right. I got my grungy hat. Speaking of Country Shore, we got winners of a winner of the Country Shore giveaway, which actually I need to pull up real quick. Sorry, guys, bear with us. Got it right here. We got Bill L. from Atlanta, Georgia. So, Bill, you got a Country Shore hat coming your way and copies of our ebooks. So enjoy those and make sure to sign up for the Country Shore giveaway on our Facebook page. And I should mention Country Shore is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. So hop on our Facebook page and sign up for the Country Shore giveaway, win yourself a hat and some ebooks. And while you're there, you can vote on the question of the week, which Cody, take that away.
Oh, this is a good one. So the results of last week's, we had, would you prefer a job in coding rather than your current job? And I thought we'd see kind of like a big runaway with yes, considering the feedback I usually get on this, but it was right on, it was kind of split, 51 yes, 49% no. So we kind of, these polls surprise me a lot of the times. It's kind of like every week is like a Donald Trump win, electoral win.
Completely out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly.
World after it happens.
And then, so this week we have, do you consider yourself good at math? Because we're talking about what it's like to have, to work in technology. And so a lot of people assume that you have to be like a math whiz to be good at software development. So
good is a vague term. So I guess take that how you want it. But
exactly, that's the name of these polls. Surprises and vagary.
Vague terms and surprise results.
That's right.
The Gunner Technology question of the week.
It sounds like one of those drinking games, like Cards Against Humanity.
Fake terms and surprise results. Yeah, so hop on our Facebook page and vote on the question of the week and sign up for the Country Shore giveaway. And I guess we'll dive right into it. So the question this week, and it's actually really interesting because we have both sides of the coin between the two of us. So the question is, do you need a computer science degree to be a software developer?
Yeah, I tried that path. And the problem is I think I jumped in too late because I was a finance major and then a journalism major. And I got into kind of the software side of things while I was a journalism major. And so I kind of figured, and I had actually done some real work and created some sites and wrote some code for a newspaper that I was working for. And so I figured, I'll try out my hand with some computer science classes. And I was just so off put by where I had to start. I was able to test out of some classes, but then even when the class I was put in, I was so put off by it. I kind of just was like, all right, well, I'm going to go down the self-learning path.
You were put in and put off? Do you mean you were put off because it was too basic?
Yeah, it was like we got our syllabus on day one, which is par for the course in college, but it had all our projects for the year. And each project was to take 2 weeks. And I finished all the projects before the first project was due. And then I got a B+ on my first assignment for using object-oriented principles. And we weren't going to get to that until the 6th project of the semester. So at that point, I just realized that
that's a good reason to check out.
Yeah,
getting really punished for knowing too much.
And I had tested out because there was 2 classes before that you had to pass. One was like intro to C, and then like intermediate Java, and then this was advanced C++. That was the course that I couldn't test. I wasn't allowed. The dean would not let me test out of it. So I was sitting there being like, if this is advanced C++, then I'm going to be just fine.
Then I'm a genius.
Yeah. Then I'm just consider me F#.
I guess that's interesting too, because it sounds like your program is more practical than theoretical, or the program at University of Florida.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I never even considered. I was so hands-on and practical. I had never really even considered that there was like a theoretical side to this. Computer science was always like, because like I broke into it based on need. Hey, we need to do this. Okay, well, based on my very limited understanding of writing code, I'm pretty sure I can solve this by writing code. So the idea that there was theory behind all of this was kind of shocking to me. So I probably could have looked into like an algorithms course or something of that nature, but I just was kind of like, all right, well, I wasn't even exposed to that side. So I was like, I'm not going to learn how to do the things that I need to do. So I'm not going to waste my time.
Well, it's interesting too because the more theoretical side, and the program at Wesleyan was basically entirely theory. There was almost no practical application. There's a couple classes. There was like a software development class where you actually built an application. We built like a mailroom manager for the school mailroom. But most of it was, uh, pretty deep theory, sort of like the theory behind uh, Turing machines, finite state machines, stuff like that, or even the algorithms course was a lot of theory. There was a programming language course that was almost entirely theory. You would learn, I think we learned like 3 different languages that sort of represented each of the various programming language theories. So an object-oriented programming language, a functional programming language. Um, and that stuff was fun, and it sort of got you thinking in a certain way. And some of it is still applicable, but a lot of the theory that you learn is sort of behind the scenes when you're working day to day. So a lot of it is built into the languages that you're using. So stuff like big O notation, which is basically a measurement of how long stuff will take, often how long it'll take in the worst case scenario. A lot of that is built into the languages that you use, but you're not necessarily working with the theory that you learned on a day-to-day basis. So I'm not sure how relevant it is versus just diving in and learning how to write code, if that's sort of where you're heading with this stuff. If you're heading towards a PhD or you want to teach, then obviously the theory is of the utmost importance. But if you just want to build websites and mobile apps, you don't necessarily need a college degree that's deep in the theoretical side of computer science.
I imagine there was like this class, like theoretically, what do you do if you spend 2 hours of your life and realize that the bug was that you forgot a semicolon at the end of line 50?
I wish I had that class. It would have saved
Which,
me so much time.
the only answer is to stick your head in the oven. That's the only.
That's the final exam.
But it's funny because this is exactly where we dropped off last week, which was kind of like there definitely is a need for both sides of this. And we were talking about, we're using the example of artificial intelligence and machine learning. There's people who kind of who build the tools. The scientists kind of build the tools to perform this type of stuff. They figure out how artificial intelligence works and kind of release tools for people like us on the practical side of things to use artificial intelligence for practical purposes.
Yeah, and actually, you got to give credit to the researchers where credit's due, because they do. I mean, the algorithms, the design principles, all kinds of stuff that they come up with ends up making the practical day to day much more efficient, and you end up building better stuff. It's just you don't necessarily need their knowledge base to be able to fail over.
Right. And it's kind of like there needs to be a clean separation of responsibilities. Like I for one would not want to be working on the kind of figuring out artificial intelligence. Like I want to be the one who figures out uses for artificial intelligence, if that makes any sense. Like
absolutely, yeah.
It's the difference between like being a mechanic for a NASCAR team and a driver for a NASCAR team. I think that's kind of the best analogy I can think of.
Yeah, and I mean, if you want to be the NASCAR driver, which I think most people do, I think there's a certain type of person who loves just reading, theorizing, sitting down and writing a whole bunch of papers about computer science. But if you want to sort of be in the weeds building stuff, and I mean, there is something to say about the actual coursework of computer science. I guess just messing around with the stuff you learn in, say, like an algorithms course. I mean, there's nothing stopping you from building a whole bunch of different software to try out the algorithms you're learning about. So, you can easily turn the theory into application, and that might help down the road when you're sort of job hunting. You'll have actual stuff to show. So in a way, it does kind of force you to build stuff if you don't have sort of the internal motivation to build stuff on your own. So a computer science degree is probably useful, I would think, in that instance.
Or if you're working on the mining team from the movie Armageddon, where all the science is telling you that last piston can't push through that oxidized pocket of metal on that asteroid, but you're Ben Affleck, and you
just know it will.
You just know it really well, and so even though the science says it can't happen, you just push on through.
So if you're in the movie Armageddon, then a computer science degree is worth it. What about from a hiring perspective? Because we get this question a lot from people that we interview: is how important is not, or how detrimental is not having a computer science degree? And I mean, I think it used to be a huge detriment, but I think more and more it's becoming the case that we just want to see that you can do good work, that you can build cool stuff, and that you have sort of like the craftsman mentality that you love diving into code and making stuff work.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I've kind of, well, because I come from the world of non-computer science degrees, I've never really looked at that. I mean, I think that certainly it can provide great assistance, but it's like saying it could be a hindrance. It could be a great boon. It just depends on how the person views that computer science degree and what they got out of it when they were obtaining it. So like the piece of paper in and of itself means nothing in terms of hiring. But there could be skills that you picked up on your quest to get that piece of paper that can make you a better web developer or a mobile app developer.
That's actually a really interesting aside, because I think in general, I'm not sure college degrees are worth anything. Not even necessarily just talking specifically about a computer science degree, but I think they're incredible proof that you can stick to something for 4 years and put in a ton of work to get that piece of paper. And that tells me more about sort of, I guess, willpower, motivation, and I guess something too about intelligence, depending on how well you did in school. So it's almost like college. The purpose of college used to be sort of to become a scholar. I think the purpose of college today is basically to prove to companies that they should hire you because you can do college for 4 years.
Yeah, that touches on something that we've talked about before, in that it used to be perfectly legal and kind of standard procedure, I think in the 40s and before, for companies to give interviewees IQ tests.
Yeah. Which I think companies still try and do that, but in a very sneaky way. Like football teams give players the Wonderlic test, which is functionally just an IQ test.
Right.
But they don't call it that, so it's very sneaky snack of them.
And even more sneaky than that. So basically, large companies basically co-opted with universities and said basically, okay, great, we'll leave it to the universities to apply IQ tests, aka the SAT.
The SAT, exactly.
And then the companies would use that as a once-removed filter to hire, basically saying, okay, if you can't pass the IQ test to get into college, then we're not going to hire you because your IQ isn't low enough to work for us, kind of thing.
It isn't low enough to work for us. That's what we look for at Gunner Technology.
Yeah. The golf score, right? That's what my parents told me.
It is, I guess, removed from the IQ aspect of it too, which is a really, that's sort of such a thorny subject, because there is sort of a direct correlation between IQ and success in certain fields, engineering, software development being two of those. But I think there's also sort of the, like, conscientiousness is one of the attributes in the Big Five scale, and I think conscientiousness, even more than IQ, sort of predicts success, predicts career success, and long-term life success in general. And I think you can sort of suss out a person's conscientiousness just based on what they were able to accomplish in college, how much they did. Grades are so inflated now; it's tough to even look at grades, but sort of how much they challenge themselves. I think you can sort of get some idea of that just from what a kid did over 3 or 4 years in college.
Yeah, well, and hiring is so tough, and we've talked about this before. Is that we're in a fortunate industry where we can give someone kind of a homework assignment and pay them for doing the homework assignment to kind of evaluate their acumen in this industry. However, you brought up an interesting point that I want to get back to, in the fact that going to college for 4 years kind of proves that you're able to stick to something, especially like a higher end school. If you graduated from Harvard, that says something for you, because generally the curriculum is pretty rigorous and requires a lot of hours to get through. And the weird thing about that is I think I'm probably really jaded on this, but it kind of like goes to the whole thing about like practical diversity versus forced diversity. If someone who comes from an extremely, and this I'm using this as totally on its own, like there's other attributes you would look at, but again, looking at this in a vacuum, in my experience, and we've seen this firsthand, that people who come from legacy backgrounds, like they're a third generation Harvard graduate, they come from a very wealthy family, those people have a lot of cushion to get them through that 4 years, both in terms of not having to have a job while they're in college, and also in the fact that a lot of those universities, they may swear they don't, but I know firsthand they do. They take care of the legacies, and they want to get money from those very wealthy donors. So I know that there are contingencies made for those people. So my point is, if you're coming from a nothing background, and I don't really even mean like racial diversity, I just mean like socioeconomic diversity, and you graduate from Harvard, that actually means more to me than someone who is a third generation Harvard grad and comes from a very wealthy family and makes it through Harvard.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. It sort of goes to that. I think there's a study that said, and I might have the numbers wrong, but it's pretty close, something like 90% of inherited wealth has gone by the second generation.
Right.
So it definitely is. I mean, you would sort of just look at, Harvard graduation as, some indication of someone's intellect or grit, but you have to dig a little bit deeper too to sort of understand exactly what their experience was like at the school.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly right. I think that, a good question there is, how did you pay for college? How did you pay for living through college? Because
did you work in school? I like,
yeah, exactly.
It's shocking to me how few kids. I was like my senior year, I had a 20-hour a week, or supposedly 20-hour a week, that ended up being 30, 40-hour a week internship at ESPN, which is how I ended up getting the gig with the community group. But that was like 2-3 days a week. I would drive in and work like a 9 to 1 or 2 or 3, basically job, like my senior year of college.
Yep.
So that kind of stuff to me is more important than the degree necessarily.
Right. And I think that's a reason why sports is important. And I don't really mean like the big sports like basketball or football, but we know firsthand how many hours a sport can consume at the collegiate level. So if you're able to graduate those 4 years and be on a sports team and have had another job, like what you're telling me is that like how to get the job done, and you're not scared of long hours if long hours are required.
Exactly. I mean, you played football, I played golf, which are basically the same intensity sport. Golf is definitely as vicious as football.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's sort of the intangibles that are interesting about getting a degree. So it's not really necessarily that you need a computer science degree. I think. I mean, what do you think? Is it even worth it to have a degree, or what's the? Say there's a 19, 20-year-old who has no college experience, who's maybe been working a day job, who applies. How do you sort of approach that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I always fall back to that we're fortunate that we can give them a project. We can give them a project and we can pay them for as sort of like an entrance exam. We can give them a project and, if they complete it, pay them. And if they complete it, kind of offer them the job. The thing that I would say to people who are looking at a computer science degree is to kind of ask yourself, what type of career you want. And obviously, if you want to go into the theoretical or the data scientist side, you're going to want that computer science degree and further a master's and probably a PhD. However, you kind of want to look at your career. If that's not what you want, you need to look at the type of work you want to be doing. And so, like, do you want to be writing financial banking software? Do you want to be writing? Do you want to work for a large company? Do you want to work for like a more traditional company? Because if so, that they're going to use a computer science degree as kind of a gatekeeper, and they're not even going to consider you if you don't have a computer science degree. And I've seen a lot of those job postings where they're now requiring a master's in computer science, which makes no sense to me. But you can't really complain if that's the path you want to go. You got to play their game. If you want to go the route of kind of working for an agency or a startup, I would say just bust your ass and get that job with the agency or the startup, and don't really worry about the degree.
One last thing that I wanted to touch on, just because when you mentioned sports, it sort of sprung to mind. I think that the importance of being able to function in a team setting is really important to being successful in software development. So what sort of things do you look at in a kid's background to sort of indicate to you, I guess sports being one, but to indicate to you that they'll be a valuable team member and not necessarily just, the smartest guy in the room?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of respects, you want to look for indications that they've handled failure and they've handled criticism.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And usually you can suss that out through the interview process. I don't know if there's anything on a resume that will say, "Hey, I can handle criticism." But during an interview, you can be pretty critical, and if the person kind of just shuts down or bows up, then they're probably not a good fit. If they kind of take the criticism and ask questions to kind of get value out of that criticism, that's kind of the type of person you're looking for.
So I think that's probably a really good spot to leave it. I guess sort of as a final note, I would say to anyone considering getting a computer science degree or any degree in general, I think at this point, college is what you make of it. So you have to try as hard as you can on your own to make college the most valuable experience you can possibly make it. Because it's really up to you at this point. It didn't used to be that way, but I think it is now. To make yourself stand out, you have to build a college career that is going to make you shine as you apply to various positions.
Yeah, and the last thing, kind of on that note, you want to look for signs like that people they can continually evolve, that they can continually learn, that they like learning, because with technology it's so fast paced that you can't just be like, all right, this is the way things are done, and we're gonna stick with this. You have to look for someone who's just kind of willing to always learn, and that's something you learn how to do in college. You learn how to learn, or you can if you make it that type of experience.
Exactly right. So hopefully that's helpful to the folks out there who are wondering what to do with their college careers. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. Make sure to hop on our Facebook page and sign up for the Country Store giveaway. Country Store is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. And answer our question of the week, which, Cody, go ahead and remind them.
Oh, yeah. Do you consider yourself good at math?
Good.
That is a good question.
So make sure to check out the associated blog posts at gunnertech.com for this episode. You can check out the podcast on iTunes. We just released our new ebook for the last 10-part series on the business of technology. So check that out on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iBooks, Kobo, and anywhere else ebooks are sold. I think that's it. So that's going to do it for this week's episode. We'll see you next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll see you then.